Hi, welcome to a new film recap. Miami, Florida. The imminent future. A dangerous atmospheric deviation has overwhelmed the vast majority of the urban communities on the East Coast. Land aristocrats, think crowd supervisor-style landmasters, rule over any piece of dry land they can get their hands on. The town is devastated, for certain individuals residing in boats and certain ghetto-like regions, destitute. It's the sort of reality where individuals search for anything to get away and recollect the great times. This is where previous military veteran Nick Bannister comes in. He maintains a business where individuals can pay to encounter old recollections through a unique machine called a Reminescence machine, once utilized for police cross-examinations. Nick infrequently describes all through the story, a la old-fashioned noir motion pictures, portraying the world and his contemplations during the occasions that work out. He, alongside his accomplice and individual ex-vet Emily Watts Sanders, has clients through arrangements. This incorporates Nick's old paraplegic vet pal Hank and a repetitive client, Elsa Carini, the last option of who much of the time comes in to encounter on unambiguous memory again and again, including her and an old darling. Nick is at first brought in by the nearby police, specifically Avery Castillo, to investigate Walter Sylvan, a perishing land noble who's regardless famous for holding a syndication nearby. Nick's administrations are excused due to being late to the gathering. In any case, as he's leaving, he hears Walter inquiring as to whether he's found her, at this point, to which he answers no. At some point, not long prior to quitting for the day, a strange, charming lady named May comes in requesting an off-the-cuff meeting to track down her missing keys. Nick concurs and in the long run finds them. Nonetheless, Nick becomes spellbound by May's parlor singing, especially one tune that he later admits was one that his granddad used to sing before he passed on. Subsequent to meeting once more at a later time at one of May's positions, she and Nick ultimately structure a relationship and experience passionate feelings for one another. May recounts to Nick a story including how she ended up at a White Sea house simply seaward after her boat had floated away. Slice to months after the fact. May has apparently disappeared, and Nick is poring through his recollections to attempt to sort out where she'd gone. Watts communicates her anxiety over Nick's fixation, yet Nick rebukes it, saying individuals don't simply evaporate. Nick's gotten back to investigate the recollections of Fawkes, a previous master of a wrongdoing ruler named St. Joe. While watching the recollections, Nick sees May with Joe, alongside a warped cop on Joe's watch, and persuades Fawkes to follow more times he'd seen May. In the end, he gets to a memory where May takes a lot of a medication called Balka from Joe when he's out of the room, and she goes after Fawkes when she's gotten. This prompts Nick to begin addressing the amount he truly knew May, and he sets out alone to New Orleans to address St. Joe. After showing up at St. Joe's base camp, Nick at first takes a stab at acting like an addict to get in. In any case, it in the end falls flat when Joe sees through his exterior. Nick tosses the demonstration and absolutely gets some information about May, however he says he hadn't seen her in quite a while. Joe then, at that point, attempts to have Nick suffocated in an eel tank, however Watts dips in for the salvage, having followed Nick. A shootout happens, finishing with Joe mortally injured, Nick saved from the tank, and Joe's men dead. Joe asks for Watts to finally give him some closure, not having any desire to choke to death. Watts obliges, then brings Nick home. Afterward, in the wake of filtering more recollections of him and May, Nick understands that May had denied his vault of memory accounts and taken those having a place with Elsa. He additionally acknowledges she was allied with the screwy cop from prior. He is currently perceived as an authority of Joe's named Cyrus Booth. An irritated Watts uncovers to him that Walter Sylvan has kicked the bucket. The general population is irate that his territory syndication is as yet standing. As they watch Sebastian and his mom Swati leave, Nick unexpectedly acknowledges something. Returning to the workplace, he involves his memory of watching Elsa's previous memory as a substitute for what was taken and afterward looks at it to one Swati had seen quite a while back. She was an old client of Nick's. A sensation is dropped. Walter was engaging in extramarital relations with Elsa quite a while back, who got pregnant with his kid, another child. Acknowledging Elsa and her kid are at serious risk, not entirely set in stone to pursue her. An exhausted Watts attempts to persuade Nick to take the proof to the police, however Nick accepts the police wouldn't do anything. This slips into a contention. Watts calls Nick on his fixation on finding May while Nick blames Watts for working for him as a reason to take off from her family and previous life. He fires her and organizes to have her moved to working with Avery, making Watts leave in disdain. He's all alone to tell Nick. Nick goes to the Sylvan house and questions Swati about Walter's undertaking during a reenactment of the memory Nick had on document of her, where she tells Walter she's pregnant. She says that Elsa was one of a few ladies he did this with. The cross-examination is stopped by Sebastian, who has Nick accompanied out and requested killed. Be that as it may, one of the protectors has Nick saved due to being a previous military vet, however cautions Nick he will not be so fortunate assuming he returns. Nick then, at that point, attempts to find Elsa, yet an experience with an inhabitant young lady who realized her uncovers that he's past the point of no return. Elsa was killed, and her child Freddie, the youngster Walter had impregnated her with, was seized and apparently killed too by a lady, whom Nick reasons to be May. Nick keeps finding Elsa, just to be entertained and quelled by Cyrus, presently vigorously scarred contrasted with how he looked before, who cautions him to get off May's path. Cyrus calls somebody, made to seem like it very well may be May, to illuminate them that Nick will not be irritating them in the future. Courageous, Nick seeks after Cyrus to a neglected rubbish plant loaded with vagrants and stands up to him about May. Cyrus boasts and spurs him into attempting to kill him. He escapes because of Nick's wavering, and Nick gives pursuit. The two battle and, in spite of almost suffocating at a certain point, Nick ultimately surprises Cyrus and realizes him out with a narcotic. Nick takes Cyrus back to his office and places him in the memory machine for the purpose of questioning him. It is here the fact of the matter is uncovered. Cyrus had coerced May into working for him. The two were previous accomplices working for St. Joe, however May abandoned them to go straight and carry on with a legitimate life. He made her con Nick into a relationship utilizing data Hank had accidentally told her, similar to the melody and faking losing her keys, with the objective being to break into his vault and take Elsa's memory accounts. The two of them later found Elsa and Freddie, and Cyrus carries out the thing of killing the previous. May, having a shift in perspective, didn't hijack Freddie yet safeguarded him and got him to somewhere safe before Cyrus curbed her. Cyrus later sedated her with Balka to inspire her to let him know where she concealed Freddie. May rather leaves a circuitous directive for Nick, realizing he'll see this memory. She is sorry for deluding him and admits she truly cherished him and that she ought to have let him know everything all along. May then, at that point, continues to end it all by hurling herself to her demise, leaving Nick troubled. Nick decides not to kill Cyrus but rather utilizes the memory of his St. Joe's men consumed and deformed him to damage him, turning up the voltage on the machine to electrically lobotomize him. Notwithstanding, there's one final contort. Nick gets back to the Sylvan house during one more of Swati's reenactments and goes up against the genuine driving force behind everything, Sebastian. He was the person who requested Cyrus to kill Elsa and Freddie, dreading Freddie's presence would seriously endanger his legacy, and whom Cyrus had addressed on the telephone before, not May. Freddie is uncovered to be alive and protected at the White Sea House that May filled Nick in about, safeguarded by the police on a tip from Nick. Sebastian first takes steps to kill Nick, then, at that point, rather himself, however Nick challenges his false front. As Nick leaves, a troubled Sebastian separates in his mom's arms. Nick visits Watts at her new position. As the two accommodate, Nick admits to purposefully broiling Cyrus' mind, a wrongdoing deserving of a jail sentence. Notwithstanding, Nick urges Watts to tell Avery and the police everything as he continues to clarify for her the entire story off-screen. In a little while, Nick is shown strolling back to his office as Miami is in disarray with riots all over the place. Through portrayal, it's uncovered that on account of the data Nick provided for the police, the Sylvan family's syndication over the town's territory is at long last broken, inferring Sebastian will most likely be going to prison. Nick likewise infers to have just carried out a minor prison punishment for how he treated Cyrus and is maybe just barely getting out during this scene. He gets back to his office and re-enters the memory machine to partake in his recollections he had with May. Slice ahead one final chance to numerous years after the fact. A now old Nick is still in the machine, with a similarly old Watts monitoring him as she puts blossoms close to the tank he's in. Her granddaughter inquires as to why she's dealing with him, and Watts says she and Nick both settled on their own decisions quite a while in the past. As the two leave, we see that Nick is recalling the time he recounted to May the narrative of Orpheus and Eurydice, however such that causes it to seem like they lived cheerfully ever later. As we slice to and fro to this memory, Nick grins, content. Hope you enjoyed. Thank you for watching.